Welcome to Community Conversations on your number one Caribbean and Afrobeats music talk radio, Love Bay Radio. I am Nadia Headley, and I am so excited to be here with you as we continue this community conversation on literacy. We've been talking about literacy all month long in January 2025 because January is Literacy Awareness Month. And we've had a lot of conversations around what can we do as parents to help our children to be more involved in their own literacy process. How can we support them in the early years? How can we support them when they're heading off to university? How can we support them in middle school? And we talked about being able to arrest our own layers of trauma, some of the ways that we were taught as children may not necessarily have been the best way for us to learning our different styles and how to apply different learning styles in different situations. We have been covering it all. And if you have missed any of these amazing conversations, then go over to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube at Love Bay Radio. Remember, love, more love, LUV, Love Bay Radio on YouTube so that you can catch the replays because we have had amazing conversations going beyond the ABCs so that we can infuse confidence in our own children for their own education. And today I have another lovely guest who's an early childhood educator who'll be talking more with us about this stuff. But for now, we need to talk about what's going on. We need to understand what's going on in the world around us right now. We need to make sure we have a very clear picture. We are a global radio station, so I will not be going into any massively political conversations. Right now, it is a very, how should I say, sensitive time in the political world right now with all of the changes happening in America, who is currently our superpower. So, here on What's Going On, we are going to be focusing on education and the policies and politics surrounding education. Now, again, you guys know that Love Bay is based in Canada, and a lot of the things that I may say may be immediately derived to, from the Canadian situation. But again, I always encourage you to take a look for yourself. Make sure that you understand what is actually happening in the world, and then take from these lessons something that could be beneficial to you where you are. I think the most important thing is that when we educate ourselves as a community, we're able to stand up and speak truth to power and do that on behalf of those who cannot speak up for themselves. And right now, that is our children, right? And so if we are going to make sure that we are speaking on behalf of our children, then we need to be educated. So every week, I make sure that I drop you guys a link here below on the YouTube page, right? So go over to our YouTube channel if you haven't caught any of these links from before, because I like to make sure that anything that I say to you is something that you can check for yourself. And please, 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 because this is about conversation, this is not a lecture. So please do me a favor. When you read it, if you're like, hold on a minute, Nadia, what exactly are you talking about there? I don't agree with that. Then tell me that you don't agree with it. But more importantly, tell me what you think about it because I genuinely want to know. And so, as we've been talking about literacy, we've been looking at the changes in literacy education in Canada, specifically in Ontario. Okay. Um, and it has been really interesting watching how these changes have come about. As I shared with you guys before, um, this was not this was not a change that came from within the education system. Okay, this was not a change where teachers were given a voice to say, we know what our children need and this is really important. And so these are the changes that we need to be able to see. That is not what happened here. What happened here is that for a very long time, way too long, too many generations, um, our young people have been graduating from school in Canada with substandard reading levels. And I don't just mean, okay, well, maybe they're not reading like a Jane Austen or a Charles Dickens. No, substandard in general, basic literacy not being met. And so the Ontario Human Rights Commission created an inquiry called the Right to Read, and they've issued that report. And I have linked that report for you, but I will make sure that you have that link here again, because I want you to go do your own research. I want to make sure that you are informed and that you can speak knowledgeably on this. So when you go over and you take a look, you'll also see the key changes that have been made. If you are an educator, if you are a parent anywhere in the world, I want to pay very close attention to some of these key changes, because if you're in a country that is telling you that reform needs to look like what is happening in North American countries, Canada and the US, I want you to see that they're actually going back to things that your country might already be practicing, and really speak up on behalf of your children to say, well, hold on a minute. Do we actually need to make these changes? Why aren't we learning from the mistakes that others have already made? So, one of the key changes that I wanted to talk about is the role of the school library. And it says, updated language to reflect the important role of the library, learning commons, and teacher librarians. I don't know about you. I would have thought that the role of a school library was pretty self explanatory. I would have thought that we all knew that it's important that a school has a community library available. I would have thought it would have been very obvious that we need to respect our teacher librarians. But what I've come to understand is that there is not a lot of consideration given to the purpose, use, and importance of having a school based library. Comment below and let me know where your child is going to school in the world. Just give me a country, city if you're brave, and let me know whether or not your child's school has an internal library. If your child's school has an internal library, let me know what you think about that, if you think it's beneficial or you never really thought of it before. And if your child's school does not have an internal library, tell me how you think that would be of benefit to your child or children. Be sure to call us in. Be sure to use our WhatsApp phone number to make sure that you can chime in and be a part of the show and ask us some questions, and please be willing to answer mine. But if we have the school, which is teaching our children not just the topics that they need to learn, but hopefully equipping them to learn themselves and teaching them how to learn, then isn't the library the next step where our children should be able to go to explore, to browse? Neil deGrasse Tyson, famous astrophysicist and amazing educational communicator, he talks about the importance of browsing, especially for those of us who are hungry to consume knowledge. When you browse, you stumble across the thing that you didn't know you wanted to know, right? Because you may have started off looking, let's say, for a book on radio broadcast. And then you came across a completely different book in a completely different section as you were meandering and browsing through. And so while there is benefit to just being able to go onto our computers and type in what we want and it just pops up, there's this tremendous gain that we lose when we're not able to browse. And so having the ability to walk up and down the library halls, browsing the books, finding the things that are of interest to you, and the amazing way that that expands your mind. The other thing that the school-based library brings to us now would be multiple media for which our children can through which our children can access improved literacy, right? So improved vocabulary, manipulation of language, ability to use language. The other thing, if you are in a metropolis, does your library reflect the community around you? Can you find books, tapes, video, any of these tools, these media tools, in multiple languages? Because many of our children, although you're in Canada, especially if you're in Toronto, English is not a first language. English is not the at home language. And so, are we able to consume in more than one language? And whether or not English is your first language, why not have a second language, third, multiple languages, right? And so, just getting our children more involved. So, I want to make sure that we take some time to really show our appreciation for librarians, whether they're based at the school or they're community librarians. Next time you walk into a library, just tell your librarian thank you. You will be amazed how much they know. Ask a random question. I think the best thing about librarians is that they're good at finding the thing they don't know. And that's one thing that we can all learn from them is how to stay on top of wanting to be knowledgeable and keeping ourselves knowledgeable. And I am so happy that I have a chance to bring my colleague and friend up with us. Jenessa has always known she wanted to teach, and as she began to learn more about herself, she found her niche in early childhood, in the early childhood sector. She is dedicated to her vocation of empowering the next generation, as well as providing families and children with resources that support their daily development and their lives. As a committed educator, she has vowed to foster creative minds and busybodies with a variety of settings and resources. She especially loves to liven up a room with some music and her smile, I will add. Her educational philosophy encompasses enriching the quality of life for children and families that require additional supports by coaching them with skills to thrive in their own environment. After becoming an early childhood educator in 2011, Jenessa has been striving to be of excellence to the next generation through education. Janessa has worked in the nonprofit, the for profit, and not for profit setting, and even globally, living and educating in South Korea for 4 years. Janessa has taught in many settings, such as the classroom, tutoring online and in person, and most recently in early on centers. And for those of you who don't know, an early on center is a free government provided space in Ontario where anyone who has a child between the ages of 0 to 6 can come with their child. So any caretaker and a child can come and socialize with other caretakers and their children. And this is a room that is equipped with everything that you'd find in a kindergarten classroom. Also has an educator there to help support you and show you different ways that you can be engaged in fun learning through play activities with your children, implementing the how does learning happen curriculum. As a child, for Janessa, literacy was not high on the priority list as a result of being used as punishment, which is very something we have to talk about as Afro and Caribbean people. This hindered her ability to learn as an adult. Later in life, she found a passion for literacy as a tool for therapy. Her newest occupation is being a mother, which has allowed Janessa to see literacy come alive in her own child's life. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Miss Jenessa Hunt up on the stage with us so we can go so much deeper into this. Jenessa, how are you?
Hello, I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Always better when I see your smile. I had to add that in there because I mean, liven up a room with music, sure, sure, that's a tool. But it is when you walk through the door, okay? It is just that aura and that presence that you bring with you through the door. That is what livens up a room.
Why, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, please. Now, before we jump into this real talk, there's something that you said here that I feel like it struck a chord with me, and I am so very sure it has struck a chord for many of our listeners who come from African, Afro Caribbean roots, living all throughout the world, throughout the diaspora. Punishment, reading as punishment. We need to talk about this.
you know, I, as you get older, you understand the
Mhm.
tools that your parents had, right? And we can't necessarily fault them for what they knew and what they didn't know, but you have an understanding in trying to heal from those things, where the trauma derived from and how we got here. So in discovering that, you realize patterns that have come about as you've been raised, and just trying to erase that. And like I said, now I'm a new mom and trying to rewrite that story for my child is basically
Yeah.
where that is. But when you're a busybody and your parents just say, go sit down and read a book, like, and I was, "Oh, okay, fine," you know what I
Right.
mean? And then, like, you miss the joy that books really
Mhm.
do bring, and now as an adult, like, and as an educator, like, that's really what like, incited my own personal passion for literacy. But I just wish that it was part of my early childhood
Mhm.
story, but here we are, and you're trying to
Yeah.
do better for myself, for my child, for the next generation, for my community, for the world, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I remember, go and sit down and read something. Um, but I think one of the things we need to also consider as technology improves and the devices become the treat, right? And the
yep.
message that we're sending when,
Mhm.
the device is the treat so you can watch or play a game or something like that, but then the book is work and the book is the punishment, and
Secondary.
you have to have quiet time, you have to sit here and read this book versus, oh, you get to be on your tablet for half an hour, right? And those subliminal messages that we are still transmuting
Yeah.
because they're so deeply ingrained within us, right? Just even down to the nitty gritty of how we use the language,
Yeah.
But yes, I remember the first time it dawned on me that reading might actually have been fun, you know and I think it was, I don't know if you had those illustrated classics. It was back in the day. It was kind of like a collector's item. I can't.
Yeah,
I can't
those
explain it.
big, huge ones. Yeah, yeah.
you know, I
Or they
can't even
came in like
explain them.
sets.
The Caymans,
Yeah,
yeah, right. So the
yeah,
little bits, right?
yeah.
And so I had Heidi and Oliver Twist and a few of them, and I think it was somewhere in Robinson Crusoe that I was like, this is a good story,
Yeah,
and you're imagining things.
yeah.
But before that, it really was a chore. How old were you when you got your first library card?
Oh my, that's an interesting question. You're really like making me have to go back. um, I actually don't know the answer to that question. However, I used to frequent the library as a kid, but more so like I was. I'm a millennial, right? So, we were in that transition time of technology, right? So we used to go to the library to get like video games, like computer games or things like that. And I went to the library like to use the computer and stuff like that. Um, yeah, books were definitely a part of the library experience, but I don't think for me it was the
The
primary reason
primary
why I went to the
reason. Yeah,
library.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, there's a librarian in our cluster that I hope one day will join me on these conversations. But one of the things that I could imagine hearing her say would be those tools also just made it comfortable for you to be at the library,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that you
It
can
made
build
it a
a
safe space regardless. Yeah. That
exactly.
being said, sorry, your intro and I like the fact I am privileged enough to say that I don't know a school that doesn't have a library.
Mhm. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
can't imagine
What that is
that
like,
be
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
within each classroom, we always
And
have
that it
like
would
a
be important to have to convey the importance of
yeah,
having such a library.
absolutely.
I couldn't even imagine why that would be a thing, but it is. And we don't know across Ontario, particularly rural Ontario,
Hmm.
what those opportunities are or aren't for school based libraries. So I'm really, really interested in hearing what other people's school experiences have been like, for sure. I was about 12 or 11 when I got my first library card. And
Hmm.
I remember being so disappointed in my parents, I remember being so completely disappointed that they hadn't brought me to the library before. And I was in Barbados at that time, and so my primary school, elementary school,
Yeah.
um, it was a massive complex. There was a primary school, a nursery school, an annex, which is, I'm sorry, we weren't PC at all, but that's where you would send children who needed extra physical and developmental support. And then we had a teachers training college. We had everything except the secondary school, basically, from right from nursery to
Mhm.
tertiary. And so they had a library, but it wasn't for me as a child. And so when I got into secondary school, I had my first like real project. And I had to go to the library to find information on it. And we did have a school-based library, but I needed, big,
For children, yeah.
yeah, the big thing.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't even know where it was. I didn't know where the Barbados Public Library was at 12 years old. And I just felt so disappointed that I didn't know. I felt like I should know. And then I went and I got signed up. And of course, the librarian was giving me a lot of sass about why I was now signing up for my first library card. But I made a vow at 11, 12 years old that my children will always grow up going to the library on a Saturday, and that it would become a normal thing for us to do. But we are going to get more into this conversation. We're going to talk about what literacy is, because we've been discussing literacy all month. But we want to take this time as we close off this topic to kind of go back, maybe recap and flesh out some things for our listeners and our viewers. So, what is literacy? What's your definition, your working definition that, we as lay people, as parents, as supporters of children can walk away with?
Yeah, well, the dictionary definition of literacy is just the ability to read and write, right? So, does that mean that we don't have to worry about literacy before a child is able to read or write? Absolutely not, right? So personally, the ability to recognize, sorry, my definition is the ability to recognize sight and sound of letters, and this is, or characters, right? Because, various languages don't necessarily have letters, and using that in every day,
Mhm.
whether it's, cues or even just being able to do a recipe. So that's literacy in my
Mhm.
personal definition.
Yes, yes. And I'm so excited that we get to talk about this and to look through, really what parents can take away from this conversation on literacy, because it is one thing for us to, if we think about, oh, literacy is just reading, then we don't realize, like you talk about, that language and speaking is a part of literacy, the recognition of shapes that eventually goes into the recognition of letters is also about literacy, and just day-to-day life in the life of a small child. If it is colorful, and I don't mean like bright colors colorful, I mean eventful and enriching, that those are all parts of literacy, because it forms familiarity with, different vocabulary, different terms, right? How many words, and what's the variety of words that your child is even hearing throughout the day. So, how are the ways that literacy can happen, can be driven? What are the modes and modalities of literacy?
Right. So literacy can be seen in so many different ways. Like basically what you're asking is, what does it look like? Right? How do we recognize, okay, this is literacy recognition, or this is sound recognition, or so obviously it looks different on the varying ages. For 0 to 12, um, it's a lot more simple, but it has to be intentional. So that's everything from, I like to break it down in three, like what is it reading, right? What are sounds? What are letter recognition? So for reading from 0 to 6, it's really helpful to have black and white books, just because we know that just around 4 months is when they start to see colors and stuff. So black and white really helps that contrast and be able to see what it is that they're looking at, right? To be able to focus in on the shapes maybe in a book. So black and white books are great. Having words, books with less words. If you're talking too much and it's sometimes it's a little dull, they lose attention. So making sure that it is able to be captivating for the child. And we want children at all ages to be able to be comfortable with a book in hand. And I find that sometimes as parents or even educators, we value books so much that sometimes, if you see how a child handles a book, it might give you a little bit of anxiety. So, giving them books that are handleable, that they would want to. And I, in previous sessions, I know that you guys have spoken about it, but I just have a little example, and they just have different things that they can put in it. You can even, touch it. This is my son's book, obviously. He loves to put this in his mouth and he'll just play with the flaps. So it's very interactive, and, it gets them into page turning, right? Like small things like that, that is literacy, right? That is one way that we can look at it as literacy. So that's reading. When it comes to sounds, for 0 to 12, they make tons of noises.
Are we talking about years or months?
Sorry, 0 to 12 months. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
We're talking infancy right now.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about their sounds, it's really good when you're mimicking their sounds, right? Because now they hear the sound they're making, but they're seeing how it happens in your mouth, right? So having those one-on-one interactions where we're going back and forth, right? Not only is that, literacy, but you're also bonding with your child, right? So it's a great practice to start right from the beginning. And, they know too, when you are making those noises that you're going to copy them. So they like to make different noises, especially when it's like a new one, right? Like, we're used to the, but sometimes they're like, boo, right? So you broom, right? So, you're putting words now to their sounds. And that in itself is, literacy practices. When you're in reading, using really exaggerated sounds or actions, and maybe even adding in a song, right? Different varieties of, so like you have a story that you read all the time, but now you're putting music to it, right? That is another version of literacy. So that's more the auditory examples of literacy. But in terms of letter recognition as in infancy, obviously visuals is the best way to do it. Using your finger when you're reading stories together, looking at letters and reading the story together. But one thing that I like to do, I got this little set, and I actually had been using it when I was teaching online. But now with my son, it's a toy. So I like to just throw him in his playpen, and sometimes if we're parallel working and playing, he'll show me a letter, and I'll say the sound, and I'll say words that are associated with it, right? And we're just playing, right? But that's still learning in itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great to just have these little things, because from 0 to 12, as parents, we're the primary giver of literacy. And these are all just little things that you can do in passing, right? This isn't necessarily something that you have to carve out a huge section of your day for, because who has time for that, right? So just embedding these things in what you're already doing, and turning it into play, right? And that's, at this point, it's basically just making literacy intrinsic, making it exciting, making it inquisitive, right? Making it something that they want to learn more about, something that they find intriguing. So yeah, that's the best way. That's what it would look like from 0 to 12 months. And now when you're going on to older ages, you're not erasing anything from before. We're just adding on to it. Maybe you won't have black and white books as much, but we're just adding more skills to it. So from, let's say, 12 months to 24 months, I know that's a huge range, but we're just adding to it, right? So we're not changing anything. Maybe you're adding a couple more words in your books, right? And now we're not just going to have books that have ball, cat, right? That is more toddler reading because you're getting them to do the reading for themselves, as opposed to you being the giver of reading. Um, but we're still keeping language simple. But from 12 to 24 months, you can maybe make it a little bit longer. My favorite is I Like You Forever, I Love You for Always, that Robert Munch book. I Love You
Oh,
Forever is what it's called, because it's just so rhythmic. Like, what's going to happen. It's fun. There's a little bit of music in it. You know what I mean? And like it's a little bit graduated language. Maybe adding books with different languages, right? Uh, Other than your native language. Um, Adding books with numbers. So just having that variety is the best way. And in terms of handleable, having books that your child is able to actually use themselves. Ones like this that are interactive, right? And it has like little textures in it. Like that's a lot of fun for children, right? Who doesn't
yeah.
want to, oh, peekaboo. Who doesn't like right? Oh, let's talk about it. Now we're putting language to what they're experiencing. And then, the questions arise, and there's various interactions that happen as a result of that. Also, at that age, having books accessible to them. I mean, at all ages they should have books accessible to them. Realistically, this little bin here is in we have a bin in our bedroom, we have a bin in the bathroom, we have bath time books, we have a bin downstairs, right? And like they vary, right? So the ones in our bedroom are usually longer books. The ones downstairs are more for his playtime. That's like books he can handle. Bath time books, obviously waterproof, and we even have like a color changing book. So just like having it embedded in everything around them is the best way to do it. Even like having them a part of it. So from 12 to 24 months, they're able to do activities with you at this point. So maybe making a book together. So, you start with one letter today. Let's look at all the things around the house. Go to the park and find all the things around the park that start with A. And so we build this book. So now we're making a project together, right? And you can see the many things that they end up discovering. Maybe it's going around your house and putting letters on around your house. Oh, D goes on the door. Let's put a T on the toilet. Let's put an L on the lamp, right? And you're getting your child to do it, right? We're just going to give letters and you take it around the house. And, just make that exploration within literacy. And then, as they grow older, just keeping, life gets very different at that stage, right? We're going to school, we're doing so many different things. So just, again, trying to embed it in daily practice, whether it's, okay, we wake up and we have a fun game while we're getting ready in the morning, right? Maybe we sing a finger song about letters. Maybe we sing our child's name. Like, for example, my child's name is Elias. So we sing Elias, Elias, right? Anyway, to embed it throughout the day.
Yeah.
And, everyone's favorite time of day, a bedtime story, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just keeping literacy on the move, lots of fun, and within every part of your day.
Mhm. I love that. So let's recap because the overall theme is embedding literacy in everything that we do. You just reminded me because I completely forgot that we used to sing my older daughter's name. I totally forgot about that until you started singing Elias's name. Jota A H Zeta A E R A in
Yeah,
Spanish,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
And we would skip to our early on center and back singing Jota A H Zeta A E R A.
I love that.
But just embedding it in everything we do. So we talked about being able to experience literacy with your full body, right? So when we have our little ones between 0 to 12 months, what is something that they can hold, handle, touch that doesn't give us the heebie-jeebies, right? So don't give them a book with pages, because they're gonna eat that. It's gonna be they're gonna tear it. They're gonna stand on it. You know, do all kind of fancy things with it because they're exploring their body, right? And
Absolutely.
what can my body do?
And their
And
senses. Yeah.
exactly. So we want to give them something that they can touch, hold, handle, put in their mouths, etc. You talked about, are we looking at it? Are we interacting with it through touch and feeling? Are we listening to it? You know, and is it something that we can do together as we get older? So between 12 months and 24 months, can we walk around the house? Can we, as we, again, as Janessa said, not necessarily carving out a whole part of your day, right? Just integrating it in your day. So you're on your way to work, you're on your way to nursery, you're on your way to school, wherever your day is taking you, you're off to the supermarket, and you're including this in every part of their day. And then the other thing you mentioned that I really liked was just having it in different places where the child is going to be so that it is a natural and normal part of their environment. So, bathroom, play area, bedroom, the places where your child is going to be interacting with life and living is also where they're interacting with fun and learning. And there being no separation between fun and learning, it's all one thing,
All
right?
together. Yeah. That's life.
And so we love that integration of learning, and I'm hoping that these are tips that parents, caregivers, and loved ones of little ones are able to take away from here. Now, this is all well and fine, right? But we're both moms of small people. I just want to check in with production. Are you hearing me clearly, please? Just let me know if we're good and clear. Okay. So we're both moms of very small people, and we're both on maternity leave, and we're both, wanting to create something that will support future generations of education and through their learning. And in that need to do that, and with our background in education, we know that right now parents are enjoying their baby, but then also worrying, right? You're looking at all the developmental lists online, you're comparing at play dates, is
Yeah.
my child doing that thing yet? Oh, they're already doing that. How come my kid isn't doing that yet? You know, and you're looking out, you're dodging snarky remarks from other parents. There's so much involved in parenting a small young baby. What are ways that we can ease some of that worry and ease some of that frustration? How can we say, blanket, your kid is okay? If this is happening, seek some professional advice, right? For those of
Yeah.
us who work in education, we kind of have some broad understanding of the okay box, and we're going to get you some extra support box,
Yeah.
right? And so help us, help the parents who are home kind of freaking out right now. I'm buying all these books, but my kid isn't really playing with the book. Or I see my niece or my nephew, they're really into books. What am I supposed to do? How do I help my kids become a prodigy? All these different, all these things that people are freaking out about, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how can we calm and reassure caretakers and parents that we're going to get through this and we'll do it together?
Right. Yeah, that is a loaded question, but let me try and break it down in like three basic steps. First of all, your child feels what you feel. Um, so it's really important, like, it's really important to give yourself as well as your child grace. Um, Learning is not something that happens in a day. You could do the same thing for 60 days straight, and on day 59 is when your child really takes it in, right? Or 2 years straight, and that's when they decide that they really have an understanding for it, or that they want to show you that they have an understanding for it. Maybe they've already understand it, and the more we force them, the harder it is to be able to get any clear understanding or clear receptiveness. But that also brings me to my next point. There's two really basic ways to look at language development. Especially through infancy, and it's looking at expressive and receptive language. And children do not really express very much at the beginning. They're not able to. So as we continue to give them the skills, give them the words, give them language, that's when they can start being expressive. But until then, they're taking it all in, right? Um, from personal experience, learning a language as an adult, I've experienced a lot of anxiety speaking another language. Nobody likes to hear their voice, but just like trying to learn another language is fine. I can, take it all in. I can read it. Sure, I have a great understanding of what I'm reading, but trying to converse is a whole different ball game. And that's from someone who already has a basis of language, right? That's someone who already has a first language. This is me adopting another one. Now, from someone who's literally piecing it together daily, you can't expect them to be able to express as fast as one we expect them to, or as fast as the world expects them to. Every child is different, so we can't. Every child's experiences are different, so we can't compare each other. It's best to really just, like I said, give your child that grace to be able to um, gain as much knowledge, and try and impart as much as you can, right? Just continue to feed them with that knowledge. And if we, like we said, embed it in everything, they're already going to be curious about it. They're already going to have that basis, and when they're ready, will show you. Um, However, there are instances where they may not be able to, and that's where you should, seek some help. Like we talked about, there's early on centers for those living in Ontario, um, and a lot of them have educators who have resources to be able to help you understand, what it is that your child is expressing or receiving. Um, and so if you do have any questions, consult one of them, because they're probably the best person to be able to give you that. Or, if they don't have that, they will do the research for you, right? As parents, we may not have that time. So, if you have questions, they'll be able to get to the root of it for you. But
I
broadly,
would add there as well as your local librarian in case you
right,
don't have
yes,
an early on
touche.
center. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. But broadly, I would say eye contact is the best way to understand what your child is understanding. You can see whether they're taking it in when, they have excitement, if they're focusing on the books that you're showing them, if, the daily things that you're doing, if they are asking questions, right? Or if they're with their fingers showing you what they want to do. So if they are able to, do sign language with you, if they're able to do turn the pages, right? Like these are all little things that we know that they're picking up from the things that we're giving them. Um, and if you're not seeing those things, then yeah, I would definitely recommend consulting a professional.
Yeah, yeah. And again, parents, aunties, uncles, nanas, nonas, nonos, this is not about sending you off into a spiraling rabbit hole on WebMD, okay? But we just wanted to equip you with some of those early telltale signs, so that we can make sure that you and your child's exploration and journey through understanding literacy is as smooth of a path as possible. Because, we talked about being punished, with a book. And then Joanna and I last week talked about, when you got spanked because you got a word wrong. And some of these, these many ways that our journey through understanding literacy may have taken some wild turns for us. That we want to make sure those, it's a smoother ride for our children.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're looking out for these telltale signs, not because anything is wrong with our children, not because we need to, match up to somebody else's child in our surrounding community, but we want to make sure that we are there to support them as much as possible. And, there's a lot of fear around labels. There's a lot of valid fear around over medicating children. And so the better you are equipped as that caretaker, then you're able to advocate on that child's behalf, right? And so it's not about running and hiding from things if they are making themselves, if they're revealing themselves. It is about making sure that we as a community are well educated so that we can, face it head on and deal with it together. Now, we don't have much time left in the show, but there's one thing that I have to talk about before you go. You taught in South Korea. Like
I
that
sure
is just
did. Yeah.
so cool. First of all, it's wicked cool, right?
It was a good
Aging
time.
myself because I don't think anybody says that anymore. But
Wicked cool.
wicked cool. Nonetheless, tell us about. Oops, I'm sorry. So you have this. You're born and raised in Canada, and you have Caribbean parents. So you have that Caribbean home, North American life and living. And then you have this amazing experience. You got like a whole triangle situation going on there, right?
Yeah.
Over on the more Pacific side of,
Yeah.
of the world. So what are some of the kind of interesting similarities that you experience in terms of cultural perspectives on literacy, and like things that are interestingly similar and interestingly dissimilar?
Yeah. Um, I mean, literacy, even though like in Korea they use characters rather, and we use we have an alphabet. Um, a lot of Koreans do learn English at a very young age. Um, I was teaching children as young as 3, because well, it's now not a thing, but they had Korean age and international age, and
Oh,
when
yes.
you're 1, yeah, uh,
Wait, how do you mean
sorry,
it's
when
not a thing anymore? They don't do the
they
2
got rid
anymore?
of it. They got rid
Oh,
of it. Yeah. Yeah.
no.
You only know your actual birthday. Yeah. And then they had like the lunar birthdays. So it was just too much. And a lot of adults actually like couldn't tell you their birthday. I know a
Right,
lot that don't know their actual birthday, but they celebrate their lunar birthday.
right.
So, and it's plus and minuses. It's some of their culture that's lost, but I digress. I say that because I was teaching children as young as 3 years old English, their second language, when they haven't even fully developed their first language, right? Which is a great thing. Learning different languages at a young age really helps make connections in a child's brain.
Yeah.
Um,
Some of us might say 3 is even late.
right, absolutely. Yes, people do it at infancy, right? Yeah, for sure. Um, And I would say that the way that in my school, I can only speak to my own experience. Um, the way that they do it, I would not recommend it, you know, like especially for a 3-year old. Like their way of teaching is, for us, it's on a carpet, right? For them, it's in a desk.
Right.
For us, we're learning, you know, by moving with our interactions, with touching, with experiencing. A lot of the times with those children, it's by repeating, right? So we're just repeating the sound over and over. It's a lot more focused on phonetics and building on the phonetics, whereas um, which I actually prefer. I think here we need to embed that
Mhm.
focus on phonetics, right? Well, here it's like letter recognition.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't see a lot of value in that past, you know, like spelling a word. But, you know, if we're talking about actually like acquiring language, acquiring literacy skills, it should be more focused on phonetics, right? So that's something that they did. Better than, you know, we're doing here. I feel like here phonetics is just kind of implied, right? Because they already have the words, they already know. But I think that kind of misses a step, um, which is an integral skill that often, you know, we have to kind of build in our own way as older children or even adults. Um, but as a second language, that's already embedded, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Do you think that was a bit of necessity? Because if the child is speaking Korean first and now learning English, do you think their way is because they don't see the languages are so very different?
yeah, exactly.
Do you think that they're going that way? Is it solely because this is generally how they teach, or
Mhm.
is this how they teach English to 3-year-olds?
Exactly. I mean, like, they're not going to start teaching them apple. You know, what's the word for apple? What's the word for this? No, we're starting at basics when it comes to children, right? For us, we will probably learn a new language, just more so focus on vocabulary um, before we get to the basics. So, yeah, it's more of a necessity, right? They have to learn not only the names of the letters, but you know the sounds that they make in order to get to the next skill to be able to develop reading. Uh, so for sure, it's definitely more of a necessity, and that's why I think here phonetics is not valued as high, right? Because when the child is in that setting, well, they're already making those, you know, they're more than likely speaking, right? They already have words. So it's not really necessary to go back to right? You know, let's just learn what A is and how we use A before we get to all the things that A does, right?
Yeah. But you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, to me, it is a pretty integral part, to make sure that not only do you know what the letter is, but what the letter says, and for the vowels, the two ways that we use those sounds, and how do you build off of that? It really is missing in how we approach reading and literacy in North America, in Canada in particular. Of course, now we're going back to basics, which is what we've been talking about in what's going on, right? Because now there's this call back to the basics. And so we're looking at the possibility of just integrating the things that work well in different places. Can we be on the carpet, use our full bodies, and do phonics, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other.
And not just
Today,
in kindergarten. Let's
and
take
not
that
just
all
in
the way to
kindergarten.
grade 4. Let's, you know,
Exactly.
like they
Stay
got to
on the
move their bodies
carpet,
too.
right? 100%. Priscilla from Syracuse, who's a first time listener, she absolutely agrees and she says this is a great topic. And thank you so much, Kendrick from Durban, who says that this is an excellent program. We appreciate you guys so much for chiming in because you are listening to your number one Afro beats and Caribbean music talk radio, Love Bay Radio. Make sure that you catch us through our website. You can download the app to listen to us on iTunes and on the Play Store. And you can make sure that you watch us live and interact with us directly on YouTube at Love Bay Radio. I am here with Jenessa Hunt. Jenessa and I are both currently on maternity leave, but we've been so excited to start conversations together with one another about how we can be more supportive of literacy journeys for our children and for our community where we're based in Canada. And so we've had a lot of really helpful information. Please make sure you go back and catch the replay on YouTube so that you can learn more. And the last thing that you were talking about there, Jenessa, that I really want to pull out is the importance of the interaction of culture and learning and the way how we can um, weaponize learning or empower our children with learning, right? So we talk about the things that we take for granted. We take for granted that a child who has been speaking English their entire life has been listening to English for much longer than they've been speaking it, and that they'll be speaking it much longer than they'll be writing it, and that their brains are able to connect so many more dots than we give them credit for, and that teaching them more does not take away from play, but play on its own is not intentional learning. There has to be intention in the play for it to transmit as learning. What are we putting in the child's environment? How are we equipping them to interact with literacy on their own? How can we make sure that our children can actually take what we are giving them, process it, and really show us, like Janessa said, when they are comfortable and they're ready, they'll show us what it is that they have received. And how are we creating that space for them that makes them comfortable to share with us and show us what they have received? Janessa, I want to say a huge, massive thank you to you for joining us here on Community Conversations today. I don't have time for Community Come Along, but we're going into more love because there is so much that I need to share with you here on more love. And I want to make sure that you know that our YouTube channel is, we are really getting things together here for you. I'm going to share my screen. Production, help me out here, so that you can see. Here we go. That you can find our playlist. If there is a particular show that you like, go onto our YouTube channel. So again, that's YouTube at Love Bay Radio. And make sure you follow us. Make sure that you are subscribed, please, and click that bell to make sure that you get your notifications. And if there's a show that you like, you can find the shows in the playlist. We've made that so much easier for you. All right. If there are shows that you have missed, if there are shows you don't know about, this is a great time to discover a new show over on our YouTube channel. Make sure that you are sharing that information out with your friends because we don't want this to be the best kept secret. Okay. We want people to know who we are and where to find us. Once again, thank you so very much, Janessa. And thank you to everyone who has chimed in, who's been listening, and who's been supporting us. Again, thank you, Priscilla and Kendrick, for letting us know that you are receiving from this show and that it is beneficial to you, to your families, to your communities. Continue the conversations, community. These are important conversations for us to have. We are closing off Literacy Awareness Month here on this last conversation for January 2025, but go back and catch all of the replays so that you are not left out. And in February, we will launch Black Family Love. That's right, because February is Family Month in Canada. We have Family Day, the Monday after Valentine's Day, which is Love Day, of course. And then it is Black History Month, or I like to say Black Her Story Month, all throughout the month of February. And so we will be focusing on Black family love here on Community Conversations. My friends, keep learning, keep talking, keep the conversation going.